Hey everyone, it's Braulio Rosa with the Broward Bar Buzz, and I'm here with Josh Lida again. Today we're talking about something super interesting, which is artificial intelligence and how it's impacting the practice of law, and for that matter, everything going on in the world. Josh, how are you?
Hey Braulio, how you doing today?
Wonderful. So we've been talking about this for a while, artificial intelligence, and we have these esoteric discussions. So why don't we start, and you can really tell us about what is this artificial intelligence that is quote unquote replicating art.
Absolutely. And to be fair and in full disclosure, I am not an expert on the tech. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, there's a lot of different ways that they can operate. But in a layman's terms, just for us to generally understand, is artificial intelligence leverages smart learning or deep learning and algorithms to create programs, artificial intelligence that can try to mimic thinking the way people do to replicate something. So if it's an art platform, it would be like we did before we hopped on the video, replicate or create images of a bald man sitting in the style of early Picasso, right? And it based on what it's been trained on, the algorithms, the way it's programmed, it'll spit out the images, hopefully something that matches that. So that can be applied to chat bots, right? It talks back to you, text to image, and maybe other applications as well. So very generally speaking, it is sort of what it sounds like, but there's a lot going on underneath the motor or underneath the hood, so to speak.
Right. So now we're talking about this Stability AI, and Dall-E 2 is another one, Midjourney another one. Of course, everyone's heard about the ChatGPT. So talk a little bit about that art piece that we created before. I mean, it gave us like 20 different examples. Some of it I thought looked pretty decent. Other you could tell was done by something that was not human. So maybe elaborate a little bit on that and why that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's used a lot by a lot of different artists, and there would be a lot of different reasons for using it. Some people take it and they make it like a primary medium for their practice. So whether they have their own AI that they've taken an open source code or software and they're training it on their own based off physical paintings that they've made or historical things that they found, you can manipulate the programs to generate a lot of different things. Or you can build a website like we were on Crayon, which is from the Dall-E company. Then there's Dall-E 2, which is like the more intense upscale version, right? That puts out really unique images. And you can use it for any number of things, but it's not just for making art. What if I'm making copy for my marketing in-house and I don't have an image? I can say, hey, create an image that looks X, Y, and Z, go through the list like you talked about, edit it, and use it for that marketing.
I mean, literally in 2 minutes, once we put in the parameters,
it was a 1 minute wait, yeah.
It created this pretty cool, amazing thing. So we're trying to figure out what the logo is going to look like for this podcast. And it could be bald man sitting down. That's kind of why I was thinking, because, bald. But, well, let's just talk about me.
Are we talking about me or you?
Me.
Oh, you. Okay.
But one of those could be kind of cool, right? I mean, but is that, then are we somehow infringing on Dall-E?
So that's going to go similar to the NFT conversation. The rights given by these companies are going to be based on their terms of service or the license embedded in the website, right, and how you access it. So I don't want to say for sure. I believe Stable Diffusion, which is by Stability AI, who's getting sued in a couple lawsuits, they're open source and you own whatever it produces. Other websites might not let you use it for commercial purposes, meaning you can't monetize it. So it's going to depend on the terms of service. And something you were hinting at, I don't want to get too deep into it, but the infringement aspect, there's been a lot of opinions in the art world and just the legal world generally over the implications of these programs to make these images.
I mean, it looks a lot like that era when Dall-E was painting in that kind of look. But it's a unique piece of art. It's a unique painting or drawing or creation. It's not actually Dall-E.
Well, yeah. So I mean
Picasso, but it's in that style, right?
And I always bring it up. I brought it up to you before. Like on YouTube, there are this type beats. So there are producers who are very famous for their types of rap music or hip hop tracks that they make, and there are other producers that are not them that can make songs that they think sound like them and say, "Hey, go listen to this. It's like that. It gets difficult to protect a style of a work of art.
And that is a
an
style,
idea.
an idea in a sense.
I mean, anyway, you could sit down and be a painter, and you can try to paint in the style of Picasso, and maybe you'll go to a museum one day and look at a work and be like, you know what, I think it's too derivative. It looks too similar to what Picasso was doing. So how is that really that unique? And
crazy
original?
question.
Yeah.
Can I upload my picture to this, or could I use my picture and say, Dall-E 2 or Stability, create bald Braulio with Jack the Dripper?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I forget the name of the company, but yeah, I know it made the rounds on social media for a little bit. You can upload a picture.
And wouldn't that be an original? Because it's me.
It's an image of you produced by the artificial intelligence or the program, whatever it may be.
If it's learned Jack the Dripper, right?
I don't know what Jack the Dripper is. The Dripper?
Jack.
Jackson Pollock.
Jackson Pollock.
Jackson Pollock. Oh, yeah.
Jackson Pollock, right?
So it's
doing his little
you,
flick.
but all the lines from the dripping, the painting.
Right. It's
I mean, maybe you could. And then the question is, I think that raises the big question. So in these lawsuits, Stability AI is the name of the company that's getting sued for their Stable Diffusion program. The big debate comes down to, remember I was saying before, it's trained on images or words or sounds. It's trained on data.
Right. So it loads up, you were saying, it loads up with like thousands of pictures. It learns.
Billions. So they use an open source data set. I forget, the acronym is LAION, and it stands for something, but it's an open source data set of images from the internet. And they trained the program on that data set. So the lawsuit is a class action brought by several artists, essentially claiming copyright infringement, unjust enrichment, a few other claims, maybe not unjust enrichment isn't in there, but various copyright claims and various claims of likeness or appropriating their likeness, saying you can't use those images to train your AI without my permission, because the image on its own is copyrighted. You can't use it unless I tell you can, right? Number one. And number two, the output that the AI is making is competing with me, right? If I want to sell my work and they can just say, hey, make it in the style of Josh and sell it out in the market, well, that's going to undercut me, and it's going to affect my ability to sell my art and my practice. So that's their claim.
So that's the argument against.
That's the argument made in one of the class actions that's been brought against this company.
Give me some other cons, why people are against this.
This is a little bit more philosophic and less about the legal side of things, but I think part of it is with art, we like to think people put effort into it. But you mentioned Jackson Pollock. I mean, there were a lot of people that when they saw his works, they were like, that's not art. That's just what they said. They were like,
I mean, when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my God, this is...
My kid could do it, right?
Right.
And I work with an art curator, and she loves that line, and she always brings it up at presentations. That's what people like to say about art. They say about NFT art. They say it about AI art. It's very common, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, because art is contextual, and art is a whole lot of things, and it's intention. So if I put in it, make an exact copy of Braulio, and it creates like a photorealistic version of you, is that really art? I mean, maybe, maybe not. You can probably argue against it and say, no, it's just carbon copy. But if you take that image and then layer it on something else, it can maybe add context. Then it becomes art. And then there are different layers to it. You use technology, and then you made it tangible. So the argument against it being art is something that goes back to when the camera came about. Oh, photographers aren't artists. They're just copying reality. They're hitting a button. I mean, it was a lot more complicated back then. They were still but they were like, they're just hitting a button.
Stay there.
Exactly, yeah. So this argument comes up a lot with new technology, and then the rights associated with that comes up a lot. And even in photographs, like, can you take a picture of somebody? Can you do this? Can you do that? So there's always claims against it.
So if paintings are in the public domain, I guess, and I'm assuming that at some point let's go back. So things like Picasso and these people, they must have some family relatives or someone that owns those, right? So they're not in the public domain,
yeah,
are they?
Picasso died in the 70s, so he's recent. And then additionally, with a lot of artists, art is an international sort of thing. So each country has its own rules regarding likenesses or the names of somebody or the actual copyrights on their own, or what's called moral rights, the rights to the image or the persona of the work.
So you can't just grab certain ones. But let's say Braulio is an artist, and I'm doing stuff. Maybe I'm using this artificial intelligence like that one artist that you really liked.
Yes.
And I have a website. And I create these cool images, and I have them up on my website, kind of showing my talent, and I want to sell them.
Right.
It's not copyright. Is it protected? Couldn't someone say, ooh, I'm going to use those for whatever?
If anyone watched the prior NFT video and they're now watching this, they're going to think I answer this for most legal things. But I mean, maybe it's how my brain works, but there's a lot of layers there, right? So if it's copyright infringement, what's our framework for regular copyright infringement? You brought up music before the podcast. That's a great example because there's sampling. What's the difference between appropriately sampling something? I mean, usually if you're going to, nowadays, you're probably going to pay the original song either a royalty or a flat payment to get rights.
I mean, there's a ton of sample. I mean, all this new stuff is sampled.
Yeah, absolutely. Some things like almost wholesale. It's literally almost just an interpolation of the original with minor changes.
You hear the riff or whatever. It's just, it's like one note change.
And it's something nostalgic, and it's part of like the vibe of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you maybe there's an economic part of it there and the licensing part there. But we go back to the cases built around fair use, and I'm not going to go through all the factors here, but there's a test that's supposed to be objective to analyze whether or not something's infringing if you're taking something from another work of art. One might be the market, right? Is it competing markets? Are you selling it? Is it a commercial purpose? Is it educational? Is it parody? Is it satire? Those are just some examples. And I don't think that they kind of operate on their own. I think we're human beings that kind of all blend together.
Talk about that one case that you said ended up being satire or parody.
So the Two Live Crew did a parody of the song Pretty Woman.
Here we are in South Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
Two Live Crew.
Absolutely. Great bastions of South Florida culture. I really mean that. And they had the song Pretty Woman. And they interpolated the Roy Orbison song Pretty Woman. Well, they got sued by the company that had the rights to the song, and they were saying it's copyright infringement. Ultimately, the court gave us their test to analyze fair use and found it was parody or satire, one or the other. It was artistic enough. It was transformational. They took the original and they made a funny new thing out of it that sounded good. So it was enough to basically create a new creation, and that the original person can't sue for infringement, can't get damages, all that kinds of claim. So we have a framework in the real world, and it's going to apply to AI, but what makes it complicated is, again, what is the AI really doing? And because each one's minorly different, do we have to analyze each one differently? Maybe not, number one. Number two, is it really what's getting trained on the images? I might be alone in this opinion, and there are other people that may disagree with me, but I make art, visual art, and artists do too. Nothing's made in a vacuum. I grew up with eyes. I've seen works of art and TV shows, and I've seen you wearing this outfit. It's all embedded in my brain somewhere. And when I make art, I'm taking bits and pieces and I'm interpolating into a new creation. You can argue in some ways that's what AI is doing. I think maybe Stability AI may ultimately argue that because of the way that the process works to like pull apart these images and then rebuild it and clean it up to make like a new thing. But that's the input, right? What you're putting into the text. Make the bald man sitting in the style of Picasso. But what about the output? Maybe the output is an identical copy of something. Is that infringement? You can probably, it becomes less clear when it's so identical. But you have to analyze each part of the process, I think, in my opinion, to get to that ultimate answer. I don't know that it's as simple as you can't use those images to train the AI on. Although Getty Images, so we're familiar with Getty Images, they are a stockpile of licensed photographs, hundreds and thousands and millions. They have a lawsuit against Stability AI as well, and they're claiming that Stability AI improperly trained their Stable Diffusion on 12 million images from Getty Images.
Improperly trained?
Improperly, because they didn't pay for a license, because Getty's in the business of licensing, right? So it's a little bit of a different sort of angle on the claim. Similar causes of action,
right,
but there's a little bit of a different tinge to it.
So I'm thinking business here. Stability AI says, all right, Getty, we'll pay you X amount of dollars so that we're allowed to use your pictures to train our AI. And then whatever comes out of that, comes out of that.
And that might ultimately be something that happens down the road, right? I mean, it's possible. But then there's also the claim of, well, maybe someone thinks, we don't even think we have to do that.
Yeah.
We think the way that the system works and the way it operates, it's fair use. It's out in the public. It's
You're
on
not
the
you're
internet.
not replicating the
Right.
the image itself. You're using it so that this AI can create new creations, right?
Right. So answers we don't have questions we don't have answers to. Like, are these cases properly brought as class actions? Are they too different individually to really do it in a class? Do you have to do each artist suing on their own and look at the facts and actual works that are made? And we were talking about before, if I'm sitting in the privacy of my own home and I'm just messing around with this AI stuff and I say like art in the style of Braulio Rosa, and you would get upset about it, but I never do anything with that, is that an infringement on itself? Because that's sort of what the claim is, right? You're trained it on this data, so no matter what it makes, it's all derivative, it's all infringing. But if it's not published or put out into the world, is it still infringing? Does that even matter for the claims at hand? Probably not, honestly.
Probably not.
For the claims at hand, but it's still intellectually, I think, an open question.
I mean, I would argue, and it's just my perspective, and I'm not a lawyer, that they're pictures, and you're using the pictures to teach something. So unless we're using the actual picture that we're putting out that as a final product, I would say that's infringement. But I'm not in the Supreme Court.
Well, what's fun too is now Getty has their watermarks on everything. So there are actual AI images that have been created that have bastardized versions of the watermark in the images, and also AI is not perfect. So, for example, something that AI can't really do well is hands. I have a theory on that. Artists hate drawing hands anyway. They're hard to draw. So maybe because the quality of the hands that are drawn on the internet aren't so great. But regardless, it can't really do hands. So sometimes the pictures are distorted and mutated and just look strange. They don't look human. They look like a robot made them. And the Getty watermark or partially will pop up. So there is a part of their argument in their claim that relates to trademark. You're damaging our brand. People are going to think we gave you permission to make these images. The images are well below the standards that we've put out over the last however many years we've been in business, and you're damaging our brand. That's another part of the claim. I think it's very interesting. I think the Getty claim is
a good argument.
Is really, really fascinating for a lot of reasons. 'Cause it's got that license element to it, a well-established practice, and if I'm an artist and I put my pictures online, maybe it's hard to track down who I am. And it's hard to figure out that I made the work. So maybe it's too difficult for you. Maybe there's some validity to that claim. Getty is saying, look, you took these from a training data set. Every image we have points to a URL or a unique URL saying all the information, who owns it, who licensed it, yada, yada, yada. You could have figured this out. You could have licensed it from us, like you said. And I think that's part of the claim too. So depending on how you approach the claim, I think affects the analysis, obviously. But in a major way, potentially. If you get into the debate of what's art, what's infringement, what's copying, it's difficult to prove anything.
That's a legal argument, and it's beyond my pay grade. I mean, I would think, you got to pay them to. If there's the little sticker on there, the little watermark that says Getty, well, they have a good argument there, I would think.
But I'm such a jerk, and I'm so into art that you could even argue that the terrible version of the Getty, like if you were to take those images and again recontextualize them, it almost makes art out of it. It's a weird dystopic, and I'm not being silly when I say that. I'm not saying it to make an extreme statement. I'm being very earnest with that. That's a valid artistic perspective. And so when that's infused into a legal dispute, the results can be really wild and all over the place. And we do not have precedent for AI that we know of.
So as an artist,
that I know of, I should say.
Lawyer, what's your argument for allowing this kind of stuff?
So for me, I like things that encourage creativity. Something we haven't talked about that's a big proponent that would be remiss not to mention is disabled people or people who are unable to physically make artwork. A lot of them are able to, through their own ways, leverage these technologies. And so they have the ability to express themselves, either before their current state or their whole lives, whatever it's been, they can then create. And so that you can make the argument that it's opening access of art to more people, which is actually a good thing. We don't want cloistered, tiny little pockets of people making art. We want as many people making art as possible because that's culture being exchanged, we're learning about each other. So that's one argument. Another argument is separate and apart from the accessibility issue is simply opening creativity. People forget, like you look at the Sistine Chapel, it's not all hand painted by one guy. He had a team of people, right? He had assistants. He had people doing just the stucco. He had people doing mixing the colors. I mean, it was a big endeavor. So as an artist, being able to say, hey, give me this, and I will take that and manipulate it into something. You can maybe even make more art or more precise art. There's a lot you can do with it on the creativity side of things. And I have more, but I know you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to say, when you said that, I don't know that everyone knows it. I mean, it's logical that he had a team. This is just off the topic, but
No, he had a team.
they always say, people say, well, he painted this, and everyone just thinks, oh, he did all of this alone. It's like, no, he had a bunch of team members around him.
And also, we think, I mean, we're pretty sure he painted the Sistine Chapel, but it's maybe a different conversation, but you don't know. Right? We don't have that data.
There was no video that recorded him doing it.
Yeah, exactly. But and then the other thing, so for lawyers too, and something that's interesting, there was a Colombian judge in the country of Colombia that mentioned he leveraged ChatGPT 3, which is a text, almost like a Google-esque type AI, to help him with the legal decision. And what his basic argument was, look, I didn't rely on it whole, I didn't copy and paste it. I used it to help me assist me with research, because we know as lawyers, research of anything, but legal research is time consuming, exhausting, and there can be conflicting either case summaries or reports or analysis. So if you can leverage technology to do some of the heavy lifting, whether it's a math equation or figuring out the correct equation to use, and then moving on to a more nuanced part of your challenge, right? I'm making a video. I need an outline for a script on AI, and then I can go in there and add my notes, change what I want to change, but I didn't but I didn't take 20, 30 minutes just writing down bullet points to then expound on. There's an argument to be said that it'll help us unlock more creativity, including, when I say creativity, not just art, but like work and actually in our day-to-day. The flip side is people are arguing that you're going to get reliant on it. It's broken. It doesn't work. Like ChatGPT 3, people will ask you, like, give me a legal summary of something, and it'll cite a case, and the case just doesn't exist. It's like Candy Cane Mountain versus, Farmer Town or something like that. And it just because it's scraping data from the internet.
Right.
So, and it's a machine, so it's going to get things wrong. They're not perfect. They don't operate perfectly. The creators of these technologies make that very clear, that they're not perfect. You might get answers that are wildly incorrect.
Is there a difference between the art AI, and you just mentioned ChatGPT, which is this whole, like you said, it could do decisions. It could give you a lot of information, but it's writing, not painting.
So I'm not an expert on this. I believe where this comes in is if you have access to like the code or the programming that allows, it's just code. So you can take it and build with it. So you can leverage it or train it to do other things. So I can take ChatGPT, maybe not through like the online API, but maybe I have it downloaded or I've taken the code and I can train it to do other items. So yeah, depending on the system, it will dictate what you can and cannot do with it. If it's text to image, then that's all it's going to be able to do. You know what I mean? As an example.
Yeah. So what do lawyers, I'm going to speak specifically to lawyers right now. What's something that they should be on the lookout in terms of this art of AI?
So intellectual property lawyers should be on high alert. You have the flip side of the argument, which is you have the artists that are upset, but maybe a new niche business pops up where you're actively selling your images to AI companies to train, right? And maybe make a specific thing. So there's that aspect. So if you're a business attorney or in the creative fields like me or IP, these lawsuits are something to pay attention to. If you're just a lawyer on the tech side of things, how is it going to impact businesses on a day-to-day basis? Maybe a little far away, but lawyers and law firms, I think the technology is going to have a bigger impact earlier than other industries because we have a very labor-intensive industry, brain labor-intensive.
Right.
We're always looking for more time, and people need to do more. There may be tools. I know that there's been released an AI-driven like contract drafter to help assist you in drafting contracts.
That's where I was going to go actually with the other GPT.
I think that company leverages that technology, specifically ChatGPT, to help write contracts, and they built it into their platform. I forget the name
Contracts,
of the company and all that stuff.
Wills.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's all kinds of things that in the legal community, it could be used as a tool.
Yeah, and no one's suggesting, I would never suggest as an attorney that you just put in the information, pop it out. But
gives you a foundation.
A starting point, right, and then if you're able to train it to your style and to how you like to do things, then again, you start compounding on your own idiosyncrasies and what makes you different and differentiates you. So it's going to disrupt a lot of industries, but it also has a lot of upside potentially for people.
So I love that word disruption, because I think we live in a time where it comes in cycles, but it seems like it's picking up even more. There's constant disruptions. And so the flip side on this AI is, I personally think it can be a great tool for lawyers or business people to use, and if you use it the right way. The flip side is, can at some point non-lawyers, could there be an industry that kind of comes up where use this AI to create your own will or create your own contract?
I'm so glad you asked. So I forget the name. I think it's called Do Not Pay. I don't quite remember. But a few weeks ago, they were making a big stink online because they're saying you're not going to need a lawyer for traffic tickets anymore.
Right.
Our AI is going to tell you what to say in court. And lawyers were all like debating we were debating a number of things online about this thing. Ultimately, the court said, you can't do that, shut it down. And so he took down the service.
Really?
Yeah, I believe the service is down as we speak. They have other things that they offer.
But that's an initial argument. At some point, this is going to resurface.
I don't think it's going to go away. And I do think you're right. I mean, I think you're going to have tangential industries that try to assist people, right, that don't want to pay for a lawyer, or they want to try to do it on their own. And
think about it. I mean, lawyers are expensive.
They are.
And if you're not a business, or you're not loaded, if you're not rich, it's not always easy to hire someone at, $400 or $500 an hour to do something. It makes sense, and I'm not condoning in any way, people. If you have a business and you need a contract or you need a will, you should contact a lawyer.
Please speak to a lawyer for legal matters.
Yes, definitely.
But it doesn't change the reality that it exists,
and that
it's out there and people do it. And they already leverage Google. They leverage the internet. They already do that. People already do that. It's like we were talking about in the NFT one. This is a lot of these issues aren't necessarily new. Right. They're new technologies, and we're having to reanalyze and figure out a lot of these things. How do we want it to work?
Yeah.
Right. And not that the general population is going to decide a court case. A judge is going to make that determination, or a jury is going to make that determination. But generally speaking, when we're talking about this as lawyers or as artists, but as lawyers, how do we want to leverage this? Do we want to be behind the curve in writing ethics guidelines or opinions or giving best practices to attorneys on how to either use the technology or be wary of the technology? Or do we want to see what bad stuff can happen and kind of try to put Band-Aids on it? And look, it's tough to legislate for the future, and it's not going to be perfect, but I think that is a question we have to face. I would suggest AI, even more so than NFTs, is going to really impact quickly the law.
I definitely believe so.
Yeah, and so lawyers really need to at least have an understanding of what it's good for, what it's not good for, if they want to use it, if they don't want to use it. Maybe there's a market that says, I'm the anti-AI, 20 years from now. I don't use AI. It's just me. I'm the only one, and it's who knows?
I'm the intelligence.
I'm the intelligence. I'm all the intelligence you need. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know what the future holds.
I don't know. It seems like technology's evolving, and it was 2000 that the internet was created or whatever, or something like that. And since then, it seems to have been exponential on how fast technology has evolved.
So that's interesting. I forget the name of the exact principle, but I've heard Ray Dalio, who's a very famous, he manages the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater, and he's a smart guy. And it's not his principle, but he talked about it, where you can calculate the computing power over time, right? Like the chips, how fast things can compute. And it actually doubles on itself I forget the exact amount of time, but it doubles on itself. Yeah. So when you look at the curve, it's like this. And it doesn't stop.
No.
It actually gets faster and faster and faster and faster. So it's not something that people are feeling and it's made up in their heads. It's actually you can quantify it, and it is occurring. Every 2 years, right. So,
I remember, I'm going to date myself here, but the first computer I got was a 286, Windows machine. Mm-hmm. It had 1 gig hard drive.
Yeah.
Whoa, that was amazing.
Your phone is like so many of those computers in a tiny little package.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And look at where we are now.
Yeah.
That wasn't that long ago.
No,
and it just,
not at all.
It went to 386, then it went to the Pentium, and then the Pentium did, and now, the chips are just...
Even chatbots aren't that new. I forget the gentleman's name, but there was a famous professor who's been experimenting with this, and I don't remember if it's the 60s or 70s, but there were experiments with this type of technology.
Yeah.
And even back then, there were difficulties with we didn't even talk about this, but like the relationships people are going to have with these AIs. And some of them may be emotional support, or they may be other types. You're going to see.
What movie was that?
Her. Her is the one that comes to my mind with Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah. We didn't even get into that. Is that potentially going to have additional?
Oh, I was going to go to Cherry 2000.
I don't even know what that is.
It's a cheesy old movie, man.
It sounds great.
And it was a android. This guy goes back, and it's post-apocalyptic and dystopian, and he's got to go get this thing, and it's a robot, and it's a companion.
Yeah,
it's a companion.
Yeah. Right now, I think people should think of it. It's a tool. It is a tool. And what's the best way to use it?
Yeah.
I think that's the really major question. I'm really curious about these lawsuits because they raise a lot of interesting questions. As an art, a friend of mine calls me an art maxi, meaning I want as much art in the world as possible, and I want artists to succeed. I'm always wary of any lawsuits that have, not for any particular purpose, dealing with these types of questions, because you want to be careful in chilling or worry or preventing people from wanting to experiment and make art without the fear of getting sued. So I'm very curious to see how these all play out, the evidence that comes out, and what decisions the courts make.
We'll definitely want to circle back and talk more about that. But some of my last thoughts, or I'd like to hear your thoughts, generationally speaking, and my son's going to kill me, but, obviously I've evolved on this, but I grew up in a time where they're like, artificial intelligence, it's going to take over the world. Talk about why people shouldn't worry about that, or should. I'll leave it to you to give your opinion.
I am so not a tech. Me. I'll answer the question, but
Yeah.
I want people to know I do not profess to be a tech expert at all on this or have detailed knowledge. But my very limited basic understanding, where most of these AIs or algorithms are at right now, and how they operate, is from listening to people that talk about it. I'll take a very simplistic version. If you create like a tree of questions, if this, then that, if that, then this, and you kind of create a decision tree a program can run through when you input data, these are very, very complicated and built on way more than that. So I'm
million
underselling
bits
it.
of information,
I'm
gazillions.
completely underselling it, but it's designed for a purpose and it operates in that purpose. In my opinion, we have consciousness. So I told you, I was listening to an interview with one of the CEOs of one of these AI companies, and they were getting into a topic of why can't you just ask a simple question like, I'm going to change the word because I don't want to get into that topic. Like, don't be mean. Like, just say to the AI, don't be mean. Meaning, like, if someone asks you a question, don't give like an insensitive remark back, right? Can we eventually one day train AI to do that? I think there's difficulties with that because we as people don't even have answers for that kind of question, right? So the AIs are designed and right now are only going to do the task that they're assigned. If it's to create images, it's going to make images. If it's to give you answers to questions, it's going to give you answers to questions. I don't think there's a realistic threat, at least from listening to people now with what's available, that it's going to become sentient or conscious.
Right.
Or
it's not a sci-fi movie.
Right. And it's not at the heart of everything yet.
Right.
So one malfunction won't necessarily create a single fail point for everything to collapse and crumble.
It seems like it has it has rails, and it's given certain information
for right now.
Like in art, it's given all these
Yeah.
paintings or pictures.
Exactly.
And it uses that data to create something.
So it would have to be programmed in a way to like go outside that because it was badly programmed, hacked, which I don't know the details of that, or it would have to become sentient, right? And then make a decision to somehow infiltrate other pieces of technology.
But that's always like you hear people like,
maybe one day it could happen. I mean, something we didn't talk about today is quantum computing. I mean, quantum computing is a whole other bag of worms. Not so much on the legal side, in my opinion, at the moment, but remember the chart of the computing power every 2 years? Quantum computing is going to blow that out of the water too, because just the nature of that technology. So when you start combining that with AI, maybe it'll get scarier. I don't know. Smart people say that they are concerned about it, but also other people in the space say it's not something to be concerned with. Right. So I encourage people to do their own research on that.
So I'd like to circle back later and have another conversation as this evolves. I want to see what's going to happen in this legal community with this artificial intelligence, and especially, I guess, for the IP attorneys and business attorneys, this art stuff, but this ChatGPT too, like, how can lawyers use that as a tool potentially, or I'm a big person, get ahead of the curve and really kind of help define where this goes for the public, because I think there's a potential for the public to use this in a way that might be detrimental to them in a sense, because they're not getting real legal advice. They're using this artificial intelligence. But at the same time, lawyers are going to lose business, let's be honest, because they're not getting ahead of it. And so it's a hurt because people are going to hurt themselves.
Potentially, yeah. It may be all of that, you know. And I forgot to mention this before, if I can, just before we close out.
Please.
On the art side of things, again, Art Maxi, and it's kind of how I get exposed
I'm
to
with
a lot
you,
of this
man.
stuff. I was at Art Basel, and I was at an NFT event down there, walking around with some fellow NFT attorneys who were in town, and we go into a gallery, and I saw a work from across right when I walked in, and it was a moving animation, and I noticed it, and I'm like, that's a Claire Silver piece, and Claire Silver is a very well-known AI artist that's been in the space since I've been in it at least 2 years, and her works are pretty go for good amounts, and she's pretty well respected and very influential in the space. And I'm like, that's Claire Silver. And I walked up and I looked at the tag, and it was. And why do I bring that up? I bring that up because she is an AI artist. She creates primarily leveraging and utilizing different AI technologies, whether she trains it herself or it's one of the publicly available ones or mashes it together, whatever it is. And yet, even though she's leveraging what these tools or these things that you just hit a button and it makes it, like some people might say, she has somehow developed a style all of her own. And at least to me, and in that moment, it confirmed it to me, and I remember it super vividly, that to your point of how to leverage it. So, people as attorneys can do the same thing. They can take these technology, right? They can take these technologies and they can create what they want to do and how to maximize their practice to best serve their clients.
It would probably behoove them to stay on top of this, because over time, it is going to be a tool, I think, that people can use and lawyers can use.
At a minimum. And maybe it's easier to learn to use in TikTok. So there's that.
All right, my friend. Well, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. I hope you'll join me again soon. We'll continue talking, having this conversation.
Whenever you want.
And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to you joining us with future conversations.